Hello, and welcome to another episode of Movies, they're pretty good. I'm your host, Travis Dudding, and today we are going to talk about David Lynch's 1997 film, Lost Highway. One of my favorites. Let's get right into it. We open on a shot of presumably a car going down a dark highway really fast, but all we're seeing is like the POV of the car, so we just see the headlights out ahead and the yellow lines in the center just flying at the screen. We get the opening credits like that. Then we cut to a shot of just like a glowing face, but glowing like from the light of a cigarette, and that's the only light. And it's Bill Pullman. We see his like glowing face. Then he opens the blinds because he's getting up in the morning, and he's got these like blackout blinds and everything, or blackout curtains, whichever. But like as he's getting up, the intercom buzzes. So he goes to listen on the intercom, like, see who's there. He's like, hello. And then it's just a voice that says, Dick Laurent is dead. And he's like, who? Like, who is this? Like, what's going on? And he goes to, like, look out the window. Of course, like, there's no window right by the intercom, so he's got to, like, walk to the other side of the house. And by the time he gets there, there's no one there. And then we cut to him putting a saxophone in a case, and he's packing to go somewhere. Then his wife comes in, played by Patricia Arquette. And she says, like, hey, you don't mind that I'm not going tonight, do you? And he's like, no, like, that's, I don't mind. Then it's like, what are you going to do anyway while I'm gone? And she says, oh, I'm going to read. And he's like, read? Like, read what? And it's kind of hard to, like, gauge their dynamic, and it kind of seems almost aggressive, but then they both laugh, and he's like, oh, it's nice to know I can still make you laugh. So he's a musician. He's going to play a show, and she's not going. She's going to stay home. Cut to the Luna Lounge, where Bill Pullman's character Fred is doing the craziest sax solo that's like ever been done. It's like so unhinged. It's so like over the top. I don't know like that anyone would like it. It just seems like so crazy. It just seems like too much. But hey, like the crowd's loving it, and he's just like going to town on that sax. It's got like applause and everything. End of the show, he goes over to the phone to call the house and see how she's doing. Probably say like, hey, I'm gonna be home and at this time or after I'm done or whatever. And but nobody picks up. And it shows like every house, like, or every phone in the house, and we're not seeing her anywhere in there. Then we see him come in. He gets home. He goes to the bedroom, and she's there sleeping. And he just like goes and like sees like, okay, she's there. But we're not sure like, okay, does he like suspect her to not be there or what? The next morning, she wakes up first and is going out to check the mail or get the newspaper and all that stuff. And there's a envelope on the steps. So she grabs the envelope and takes it in, and there's like no name on it, no note or anything, but there's a videotape inside. And he sees the envelope, and he's like, what's this? And she's like, I don't know, it was just out there, and it doesn't say who it's from. And they're like, all right, should we watch it? And so they put it in the VCR. It starts playing, and it's footage of the outside of their house. And then it just cuts, and they're like, huh, that's weird. Like, it's just a video of our house, real short. And she says maybe it was a realtor or something like that. And then they just move on from that. So then it cuts to him laying in bed, and he's just like thinking, you can see on his face that he's thinking. Then we get a flashback of him. He's playing a show, and he sees his wife Renee in the crowd leaving with some guy with like a real thin mustache. And they go out the exit, and then he's, noticing this as he's like playing up on stage. Uh, flashbacks over. He's back in bed. He's just laying there. Renee comes in. She takes her robe off and she's naked, but then like goes into the bathroom, I guess, to get ready. She comes back in, gets in bed, and then they start to have sex. It's real, like, I don't know. There's a weird tension to begin with. It almost seems like not like we're doing this because we love each other, or I don't know. There's something there. Then so we just get this like slow mo sex scene. It ends with him like finishing way too early, and then she like pats him on the back, and then it like the camera like focuses on like, and that happens in slow motion too, and he could tell that he's very upset by this and like feels like ashamed and stuff because he's got premature ejaculation problems, and you can tell that something is up, like this is a thing that happens, but it's also hard to tell if it's like, are they having relationship problems because of this, erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, whatever, or is it, is he having those problems because there's this tension and there's these other problems? So it's like, which came first? Well, him. But so then like after a little bit, and he's laying like kind of on his side, like looking away from her, and she's just kind of laying there. It's hard to like read from her expression, like what, like it's like, oh, this again, or like what's his deal, like it's not that big of a deal, it's hard to gauge it without knowing her personally. But then he starts to, he rolls back over, starts to tell her about this dream that he had, and how he was in the house and he could hear her calling for him, but like he couldn't find her, and he was just looking and looking. And then we're seeing the dream too, and then it's like it shows the fireplace, and like the fire's like real big and stuff, like almost like it's gas powered, probably because that's how the effect was. But the flames are loud, it's like making a noise and stuff. He goes into the bedroom and says that oh, you were laying in bed, but it wasn't you. It looked like you, but it wasn't you. So then after this after he's talking about this dream, then she kind of leans over to like, oh, it's never mind, it's like it flashes to when he's like waking up from this dream, and she's like, honey, are you okay? And then he like turns to look at her, and the face is like it's not her face, it's like some man, like pale man's face. And so he like jumps back, and then her face is normal again. So it's the next morning or another morning, and there's another tape or another envelope with another tape in it. Still same deal, no name, no information whatsoever. Pop the tape in, starts out the same. It's footage of the outside, and they're like, oh, it's the same tape. And then it cuts, and Fred's like, no, it's not, because now it's like showing inside the house, and they're like both like on edge now, like, oh, okay, like what's going on? The camera's like going down the hallway, and it goes into their bedroom, and it's them sleeping. So it's someone was in their house filming them while they slept. So obviously they're freaked out, like, all right, let's call the police. Cut to two detectives there, just asking them questions. They watch the tape with them, and they're like, they start looking around, like, all right, is there let's see the bedroom. And then they look at all the windows and stuff to see if there's like a place that, A, shows signs of a break-in, or B, like, that could potentially be like a break-in thing. So they get to the bedroom. They ask, like, is this the only bedroom? And they're like, first they're like, yes. Like, well, I have my, recording room or whatever. He has like a little in-home studio. So one of the bedrooms is converted into a soundproof room. Then they ask, like, do you have a video camera? And Renee says, no, Fred hates them. And he's like, what do you mean by that? Like, the detective says, like, what do you mean by that? Fred explains that, like, oh, I like to remember things my own way. And they're like, okay, like, what does that mean? It's like, not necessarily how they happened, but how I remember them. So it's interesting. It's not necessarily a red flag, but it's one of those things where you're like, that's, I don't know. I get it, but I don't get it at the same time. And the detectives are the same way. You could tell. Like, a look on their face like, that's weird, but it's not necessarily, it's not a crime to think that way. But they're like, all right, that's kind of weird. But then they ask, like, do you have an alarm system? And they say, no, like, we do, but we haven't been using it because we kept getting all these, like, false alarms and stuff like that. It kept going off and there was no one there. And they just kind of have a look like, and then they say, like, well, maybe you should start using it, because of the situation. So the detectives say, like, all right, like, hey, if anything else happens, obviously give us a call. Here's our card, and then we'll try to, like, be keeping an eye out nearby. They leave, cut to this, like, big house party, because they're in Hollywood. They don't outright say it, but, that's where it was filmed. So, yeah, this big house party, there's, like, people, skinny dipping in the pool and, rich people, all that stuff. And we also see that the guy's name is Andy, and this is the thin mustache guy from the flashback that Renee, like, left the show early with. So, there's obviously some tension. Like, you could tell that Fred's not really a fan of this guy, and Renee's like, kind of, you could tell she's already tipsy. She's kind of like hanging off this Andy guy, and he just seems like a the slimy dude. But she's like, Fred, can you get me a drink? And so he goes to the bar, pounds 2 shots of scotch, and but then as he's about to, like, take Renee her drink, a man approaches him, and this is the pale white-faced man whose face appeared on Renee's body, like when he woke up from the dream. Comes over and he says, "We've met before, haven't we?" And he's like, "No, I don't think so." And he's like, "I don't think so. Where is it you think we've met?" And then he's like, "At your house, don't you remember?" He's like, "No, you sure?" He's like, "Of course, I'm there right now." And he's like, "What do you mean?" That is like, "I'm there at your house." And he's like, "That's fucking crazy, man." And he's like, "Call me." He's like, "What?" And he pulls out a cell phone. It's mid 90s, so it's the big thick, pre Nokia, but just the bottom flips down and it's got the antenna and shit. And then he says, dial your house. And so he, Bill Pullman or Fred puts in his number, calls, and it's, this guy's voice is like, "I told you I was here." And he's like, "How do you do that?" And he's like, then it just starts, it says, "You invited me, like, how'd you get in my house?" He said, "You invited me." And then he just starts laughing, but it's like the guy on the phone and the guy that's there at the party are both, like, laughing at the same time, and it's like echoing, and it's like super creepy, and the dude looks super creepy because they obviously, like, made him, like, look extra pale. He's got, like, shaved eyebrows and shit. they make his like eyes darker and his lips, like kind of dark too. And it's like, man, this guy is super creepy. He is played by none other than, eventual murderer of his wife, Robert Blake. I mean, it's an OJ situation where he got away with it, but it's just crazy. It's just weird. It's like, man, that guy is really creepy. You look him up on IMDb, and it's like, oh, well, it's Robert Blake. That's why. So Fred's like shooken up about this, and he goes, well, first Renee comes back, and she's like, hey, like, I thought you were getting me a drink. What happened? And he's like, hey, like, hold on one sec. And he goes and talks to Andy, like, hey, like, who's that guy over there? The guy in black. And he's like, oh, that's a friend of Dick Laurent's. And then, he kind of has like a moment of like thinking, like, or remembering. He's like, wait, what? Like, Dick Laurent is dead, isn't he? Because of the, the voice on the intercom. And like Andy's like kind of like, what? No, like, what? Where'd you hear that? Like, no, Dick Laurent can't be dead. Do you know Dick? He's like, no, I don't. Like, I just heard that. But he's getting like kind of agitated about it. And then Fred's like picking up on this, and he's just kind of also like kind of agitated just because of like everything that's going on. And he's like, all right, let's go. And, Renee comes back up like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, all right, it's time to go home. So they leave in a hurry. They're driving home. Fred asks her like, hey, how'd you meet Andy? And she said, well, he told me about a job. I met him at this party, told me about a job. And Fred's like, okay, like, what kind of job? And she just kind of gets quiet and says, I don't remember. And it's like, I think you'd remember. So she's obviously like trying to keep something from him. And they pull up to the house. Right when they pull up, Fred looks up into the upper floors, and there's like weird lights going off, and almost like someone's in there with a flashlight kind of swinging it around. Or like there's like a lighthouse thing in there or something, it's just, super creepy. And he's like, whoa, hey, tells Renee like, stay in the car, but doesn't tell her what's going on. He goes into the house to go check it out. Obviously no one's there, but the phone rings, but only like a couple times, like before he can pick it up. And, then it just stops. So then it's just, he goes out, and Renee's like coming up to the house, and he's like, hey, like, I thought I told you to stay in the car. And she's like, but she's like, drunk or tipsy. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't want to stay in the car. I was bored. And she's like, why'd you make me stay in there anyways? Like, I thought someone was in the house. And she's like, well, why didn't you tell me that? Which is a valid point. And all he did was like yell at her to stay in the car and then run inside. So, but, so then there's just like a couple shots of him like walking around the house, acting weird. He's like staring at himself in the mirror, and he like walks, into the dark hallway and then kind of disappears into the shadows. But then there's a part where you see his shadow walk across, go across the wall of the living room. But there's two shadows, almost like there's two people, but we don't see a second person. We don't even really see him. We just see the shadows move across the room. We see him in the scenes before and after, but in this shot, it's just two shadows. And, you'd assume one is his, but the other one, it's not Renee's, because she's in the bathroom getting ready for bed still. Because he, like, just walked away from her. Cut to in the morning, or the next morning, I don't know. That's the thing, is they doesn't say like if it's consecutive days. Is this like a week later? Is it a month later? We don't know. But cut to the morning. Fred's going outside to check the newspaper. Guess what? Another tape, another envelope and everything. He takes it inside and pops it in, and he's watching it, and it starts out with the outside. Then it's going inside again, but then this time it gets into the bedroom, and it's him with Renee's body like in half. Like there's her legs, and then there's intestines, and then there's, you know, the upper part of the torso. And he's just there with like blood all over him and like screaming. And he's like, oh my God, you know, watching this, like, oh my God, oh my God. And then like it, you know, smash cut to him getting punched in the face. And the detectives from before, one of them's yelling at him, it's like, sit down, killer, you know. And then it's him in you know, in the police precinct getting interrogated. And he's like, oh, tell me I didn't kill her. And, you know, the detectives are upset, obviously. It's like, man, as you would be, especially if it's like, hey, this, you get a call, you go investigate, you meet this couple, and a day or a week later, one of them's dead, and it was the husband that killed her. You know, that'd be upsetting. But it's real quick succession of scenes. It's like it's him in the interrogation. We hear a voiceover of the gavel, and you know, we find the defendant guilty, and then the judge handing out the sentence. You know, death row, execution by electric chair, and then it's him getting escorted into the prison. Gets to the cell, gets put in there. You know, has to put his, you know, he's handcuffed behind his back. He has to put his hands through the little window, and then they uncuff him, and then he's just in prison now. And one of the guards is played by Henry Rollins, yeah, singer of Black Flag. I gotta look that up. So we get a bunch of scenes where he's getting flashes of, you know, the tape, but it's weird because it's like it's flashbacks to her death and possibly him killing her, but it's only ever through the lens of, well, the literal lens of the camera. It's not like there's no flashback. It's just him seeing the video. So it's like, shit, like, did he do it? You know, I don't know. The movie doesn't want you to know yet. See him out in the yard, you know, just kind of walking around in the fresh air. But he's like, you can tell he's not doing too good. He kind of leans up on the wall, and it's kind of like ends up collapsing and stuff like that. So like they come, they get him, take him to the infirmary, and he says he's getting these really bad headaches. And the doctor asks if he's been sleeping, and he says, I can't sleep. And so he gives him a pill. I don't say what it is, but he's like, you'll sleep now, you know. So he's back in his bed. He's having like flashbacks again, and you can tell he's like, you know, his head's hurting again, like really bad. And he's like, guard, help, you know. And so the guard comes, and he's like, hey, like, you know, it's like, what do you need? Like, what do you want? And he said, aspirin. Can you give me aspirin? And, you know, guard doesn't say anything. He shuts the little window, heads back to his desk, and his partner's like, what did he want? Or no, sits down, and he's like, man, that wife killer isn't looking too good. And then the partner says, which one? And then they just both laugh, and then the, you know, scene fades. Cut to a dream that he's having, or dream vision something. Oh yeah, no, because he's awake. So he has this vision of a cabin exploding, but in reverse. So it's just like on fire, and then it kind of, you know, sucks back into a whole cabin. And then like everything like goes blue in his cell, like almost like he's, you know, getting abducted from the ceiling. And he's like looking up, and it's like everything's acting all weird. We get the road from the credits, where it's just like, you know, speeding down the road, just the headlights and everything. But this time it like kind of veers to the side, and we see a guy in a leather jacket. I think he's in a leather jacket, standing on the side of the road. And then, but that like kind of is intercut with, like the background changes behind him, and he's like in a front yard, not in the desert like the road is. He's like in a front yard, and then there's like people behind him like screaming like Pete, you know. And then everything's just weird. It's all like thunder and lightning and everything, and then it just cuts away. And then we just see Fred screaming in pain, but it's all like, 90s metal music video, and his head's like going all crazy and everything. And then cut to the next morning, and there's a guard coming. He's checking all the cells, and he gets to Fred's cell. He looks inside, and he's like, what the? And calls someone, and then here comes the warden, and then he looks inside, and he's like, that's not Fred Madison. And he's like, nope, it is not. And like, who is it? Like, I don't know. And then so Fred's gone, and this guy from the side of the road is sitting in his cell. And so it's like, okay, like, what's happening? And then we cut to like, okay, like, we found the guy in the system. He got in trouble way back for carjacking or something like that, but he served probation and everything, so he's good to go. And obviously he's not Fred Madison. We don't know what happened. We don't want this to like become a big thing, so let's just let him go and find his family. So that we see the parents come in. Dad played by Gary Busey, so that's cool. We see them take him home. As he's getting out of the car and going into the house, we see a car pull up across, kind of down the street, and it's two cops that are like kind of watching him because they have no idea what happened, so they're like, all right, let's just kind of watch and see what happens. So get a scene of him just kind of laying out in the backyard in a lounge chair. He's all like beat up and stuff, which I don't know that he. Yeah, so I don't know like how that happened. They don't really show that. But he's just, laying out in the backyard, like just, you could tell he's just thinking like, man, like what the hell happened? Like what was that? And then see him in his room, and his friends burst in and like, hey, like, what happened to you? Like, that's all right. Just glad you're okay. Let's go out. And so, he goes to the living room and says bye to his parents. Like, hey, like, I'm just going to go out with these guys. And Dad's like, yeah, I think that'll be good for you. So, he's happy with it. They go to like a nightclub that's, attached to the bowling alley, because they walk through the bowling alley and then they go through a door. And it's like, I know like bowling alleys have bars, but this one has like a full on, dance party in the back. So they're there. He's with this other girl that's presumably his girlfriend, and they're dancing together. And she's like, what happened to you? And he's like, I don't know. And she's like, you've been acting different. Like, even that night you were acting different. And he's like, what are you talking about? So he doesn't even remember. But she was there when he, disappeared, or what, whatever happened. Like, she was there, and says like even before that he was acting weird. We see him go to work. He works at like a auto mechanic place called Arnie's. Arnie, played by Richard Pryor, already in a wheelchair at this point. I think probably on the later end of his roles, if not his last role. I should have looked that up. But Arnie tells him like, hey, like Mr. Eddie was calling asking about you. And he's like, oh yeah, tell him I'm here, bring the car in or whatever. So Mr. Eddie comes. He's played by Robert Loggia, which in one of the behind the scenes things I found out, he actually tried to get the role of Frank Booth in Blue Velvet, and he auditioned for that, and he really wanted to play him. I think when he didn't get the job, yelled at David Lynch and stuff like that, and was like, who knows, like. And so he's like saying, it's like, yeah, like once Bill Pullman told me about Lost Highway, and he was like, there's no way I'm going to get this, like, after how I acted when I didn't get Blue Velvet. And sure enough, he got the job, because David Lynch is like, yeah, like, that's the energy I want for this character, so you got it. So that's good to know about David Lynch. He's not like a grudge holder by any means. It doesn't seem like. So Mr. Eddie shows up. He's like, hey, like, I want you to take a ride with me. And Pete is like, hey, let me just check with my boss. And he's like, Arnie's fine. Like, don't worry about it. Just like get in the car. So you can tell he's like an intense, authoritative person, but like, you know, he's nice to people he likes, but can be very scary if you're on his bad side. So they get in the car, and he's like, hey, it's just making this noise that doesn't sound right. And so they're just driving slow through a neighborhood. Pete says, like, all right, pull it over, but keep it running, and pop the hood. So they do that, pops the hood. He, like, you know, kind of adjusts a couple nuts, and is like, all right, try that. And so they drive, and he's like, man, like, perfect, sounds perfect. And so they have a friendly relationship, obviously. And also, like, Pete's all beat up, like I said. And Mr. Eddie's like, hey, is like someone giving you problems? Because I can take care of that. And he's like, no, it's fine. Like, it's nothing like that. Like, don't worry. And he's like, all right, you know, just let me know. So then they're going for a drive. They're driving through the hills in Hollywood area. I don't know if it's Mulholland Drive, but definitely in that area. And you could see the Hollywood sign in the background too. But they're driving, and someone starts like tailgating them. And you know, Mr. Eddie's getting a little like worked up about this. And he's like, man, this guy better not be doing what I think he's doing. And then the guy's like just kind of getting real close and like trying to go around, but then there's, you know, it's just a 2-lane highway, so there's no getting around if someone's coming the other way. And then the guy's like honking and stuff, and so Mr. Eddie just rolls down the window and just kind of nonchalantly says like, all right, just go around. Guy goes around, and then the 2 bodyguards in the back seat put their seatbelts on. Mr. Eddie puts his seatbelt on and tells Pete like, hey, you might want to buckle up, and just floors it and starts like trying to run this guy off the road, the tailgater. And, you know, eventually they hit a turn, and he gets him, and he goes up onto a berm, and you know, the car's stuck. Mr. Eddie gets out of the car, breaks the window, pulls the guy out, and then pulls like this giant gun out, and it's like, don't you ever fucking tailgate. Do you know how dangerous that is? Do you know how many fucking car lengths it takes to stop going 35 miles per hour? 6 car lengths, you know, and then it's just like screaming at this guy, you know, quoting the driver's handbook at him. And he even tells him, he's like, you know what you're going to do? You're going to get a driver's manual, and you're going to study that shit, and you're never going to fucking do this again. And the guy's just like sobbing on the side of the road while this guy is like yelling safety tips to him with a gun at his head. And, you know, as anyone would. And then he just gets back in the car, all, you know, and just turns to Pete. He's like, man, there's one thing I can't stand. It's tailgating, you know. It's just and Pete's like, yeah, I could see that. So it takes Pete back to work, just dropping him off, and before Pete gets out of the car, you know, he's like thanking him. He's like, hey, you like pornos? And Pete's like, what? He's like, you know, give you a boner? He's like, no, not really. He's like, oh, okay. You know, because he's about to like give him a videotape from the glove box, and it's just like, Pete's like, you know, I'm good. But I just like that like phrasing, you know. It's like, what's porn? You know, give you a boner, you know. Like, oh, that, you know. So then Mr. Eddie goes on his way. We see that the cops that were, you know, watching from outside the house are across the street from the garage, and they're like looking at Mr. Eddie pulling away, and one of them says, "You recognize that guy?" He's like, "Yep, Dick Laurent." So if you remember before, the pale guy, friend of Dick Laurent's, intercom, Dick Laurent is dead. So it's all like connecting, but we're not all the way there yet. The pieces are there, but we're still missing some. Cut to Pete at the house. He's starting to act kind of weird, just like, and pretty much mirroring what Fred was doing before, where he's like kind of wandering around, kind of glazed, and looking at himself in the mirror for way too long, and walking in the dark, and all this stuff. So it's like, all right, so something's going on, and they're connected somehow. We just don't know how. I mean, I'm gonna tell you right now, I still don't really know how, but it's it's all a thing. It's super confusing, but I feel like I understand it a little more each time I watch it, but I'm not all the way there yet. But I still just love this movie, and just I love talking about it too. So see Pete in the car. He goes to pick up Sheila, the woman he was dancing with before. It says like, hey, like you're acting different and everything. He does the the super cool guy move of just pulling up in front of the house and honking. She comes out and it's like, hey, want to go for a ride? And she's just like, I don't know, do I? And then he's just like, come on, just get in, and then they both smile, and she gets in. They're driving around. He pulls over somewhere so they could start making out. Cops are tailing them. They're watching. They start making out, and then they start having sex. But she does ask him, like, hey, like, why don't you love me, or why don't you like me? And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, I do, and I guess that's good enough. And they go at it in the car. After that scene's over, cut to Pete at work. He's under a car, working on something, and there's a sax solo on the radio that we recognize as Fred's sax solo from the beginning of the movie, but it's like bothering Pete, like more than just like, oh, this isn't a good song. It's like physically bothering him, like almost like it's giving him a headache, and he just like has to like get out and change the radio real quick. And then another mechanic, played by Jack Nance from Eraserhead and Twin Peaks and everything. He was also in Blue Velvet too. He's telling him like, hey, like I like that, why'd you change it? And he's like, oh, it was just like, it's giving me a headache or whatever. And then, he's just like, well, I liked that, Actually, Jack Nance died before the movie came out. He actually got kind of, he got like murdered in LA, like by a homeless guy or something. I think he like said some remark to the guy, and it ticked him off, and it just escalated to where he ended up getting killed. So I don't know if it's like counts as murder, but I don't know what the official charge was. But either way, he got killed. So that's crazy. But that was before the movie came out, because it said at the end of one of the documentaries, and I had read the story way back, but I just forgot all the details. But one of the special features I was watching said like, R.I.P. Jack Nance, and he died in 96. So then after this whole interaction, Mr. Eddie shows up in the other car, because he did say when he was leaving, is like, hey, like I'm going to bring the caddy tomorrow, and just get that fixed. And so he comes, he drops it off, but this time he has a woman with him, the blonde woman played by Patricia Arquette. Now, obviously she played Renee, but she had she had like black hair, with bangs, very pin-up goth look. And, now, it's like bleach blonde, Patricia Arquette, which is like I think she does have like naturally blonde hair, but I don't know if like, this is like more yellow than usual, I guess. But that could also be the lighting. But she's there. She keeps like, she's making eyes, or not necessarily flirty, but she's definitely looking at Pete a lot. And then there's like a whole, she's getting out of the car in slow motion, and Lou Reed's version of This Magic Moment is playing, and she just keeps looking at Pete, and he's looking at her, and he's obviously like struck by her, as most people would be. And but yeah, she gets in another car, and then they leave, and Mr. Eddie's like, hey, just have it, when will it be done? He's like, well, you need it today or tomorrow? And he's like, tomorrow or tonight if you can do it. And he's like, all right, then it's done, come back today. He's like, all right, just let me know. So we cut to later that night. All the mechanics are kind of gathered around, drinking and closing up and stuff like that. End of the day. Here comes Patricia Arquette again, blonde Patricia Arquette. And she gets out of a cab. She is walking up, and she's like, hey, like, I was here before. If you saw me. And he's like, yeah, like, I saw you, And she says, like, introduces herself, says, my name is Alice Wakefield. And, like, can you take me out? Do you want to take me out to dinner? And he's like, I don't know. Like, you can tell he's like hesitant. Like, he wants to, but he's hesitant because of her connection to a very scary man, Mr. Eddie. So he just says, like, all right, like, I don't think we should. And she's like, all right, well, do you have a phone? Because I need to call a cab so I can get home. And so she goes over the phone, and he's just like looking at her, and he like, something comes over him, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna do it. And he goes, grabs the phone from her and says, like, hey, we're not gonna need that cab, and agrees to like go to dinner with her. She does like switch it up and says, like, all right, if you won't take me out, can I take you out to dinner? But yep, they go to dinner, and well, no, they agree to go to dinner, and then I think she says maybe we should just skip dinner. And then so they go to a hotel or motel, Holiday Inn. Cops that are tailing him are, followed them there, and they're sitting in the car watching them go into the motel. And then one of them says, this fucker gets more pussy than a toilet seat. And we get like a short little montage. I mean, I don't know if it's a montage, but we get a couple scenes of them like going to various hotels and stuff like that. Maybe it might just be one, but it is edited like a montage, probably so the movie's not 4 hours long. But then we see him at home. He gets the phone's ringing, and he says, like, I'll get it, and he answers it, and it's just like a close up of Alice's lips just on the phone saying, like, I can't come out tonight. And he's like, oh, like, okay. He's like disappointed but understanding. And then she says, like, I think he suspects something. And, so you can tell he's a little nervous. Then it's just him in his room. He starts like tweaking out a little bit, like he was a little bit like Bill Pullman was before, but also just a little more intense this time, like closer to how Bill Pullman or Fred was in prison. And he's just, tweaking out, and he's like, he just gets up, he puts his leather jacket on, and he angrily rides his motorcycle, and he's, see him driving down the road. And then he's at the same motel again, and the sex motel, but this time he took Sheila. So he's just like, oh, I'm so horny. And then he, went and picked up his actual girlfriend to take him to the place where he cheated on her at. So, great guy. Get a scene where the parents come and kind of check on him, like, hey, like, we just want to see, like, how are you feeling? We want to, just so you know, some law enforcement called and asked to see if you remembered anything from that night. And he's like, no, like, I don't. And like, what do you remember? And then that's like, hey, like, you came home with Sheila and another man that I've never seen before. And he's like, what man? And then he just like, he got kind of quiet and didn't really say like who this guy was, and so it's like, oh, okay, like that's kind of weird. But then the next scene is him back at work, and Mr. Eddie comes in, and he's like, hey, like, you know that woman I was with? And he's like, yeah, I think I remember, the woman with you. He's like, I love that girl with all my heart, And if I were to find out that anyone was making out with her, I'd shove this gun. He pulls out a gun. He's like, I'd shove this gun so far up their ass that it'd poke out their mouth. I forget what he said, like exactly, but definitely the gun was going up the ass. It's the rest of the stuff I don't remember, but yeah, it's like, all right, he's not outright saying I know it's you, but he's like making it very clear, like, hey, I like you. So if something is going on, and I hope it's not, but if something is going on, then it better fucking stop now, because once I find out for sure, then you're dead. You know what I mean? So he's like basically telling him, like, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, but just so you know, if anything is, then nope. So then he does what anyone would do in that situation and meets with her again right away that night. They're at the motel. They're saying, like, hey, like, he's going to kill us if, this is them, both of them talking. Like, he's going to kill us. What we need to do is get some money and run away together. Leave the country, whatever. I know this guy that pays girls to party with him. This is Alice saying this. I know this guy that pays girls to party with him, and we could just go and rob him, and we'll have enough money, and we'll be done with it. I was like, well, how do you know this guy? Oh, I met him at this place called Moke's, which I forgot to mention before is where Renee said she met Andy. And then that's where he told her about the job that she didn't want to talk about to Fred. So, met him at this place called Moke's, and it's like, all right. Then says, oh, he offered me a job. What was the job? And then I don't, kind of, it's following the same thing as before. And it's like, it's basically the same story. It's like, okay, so it's not just two women that look like each other. They're, either related or know the same guy, something's up, or they're the same person, So then it's like, but this time she is like telling, like, Alice is telling Pete, like, what happened with the job. Like, she does, like, actually tell him, even though she's, like, coy at first about it. She's like, all right, well, I got told to go to this place, and I was, like, waiting forever, and there was, like, a guy with a gun watching me, and then once the sun went down, then they had me go to this room, and then there was Mr. Eddie sitting in a chair, and then we're seeing what's happening too, and one of the bodyguards just comes and like puts a gun like right to her head, and we're not hearing anything that they're saying, but we're also not seeing the mouths move, so maybe they didn't actually say anything, and she just like, oh, I know what they want me to do, and she starts taking her clothes off. She strips naked and then walks over to Mr. Eddie and, kind of kneels down in front of him, and that was good enough for him, and she got the job, whatever it was, but she's not really saying what it was, and he's like, oh. Pete's like, oh, why didn't you just leave? Yeah, because she had a fucking gun to her head. Like, it's not, he's like, oh, yeah, But what I like about it is, like, I don't think David Lynch thinks like that. I think he's exposing men that think like that. As far as I can tell, it seems like too obvious that, she's the smarter one, he's the dumber one. Not that it has to be like that, but it feels like the movie's saying like that he's ridiculous for asking that, or in that tone and everything, you know. Uh, so then they plan this heist to rob the guy that offered her the job. We don't know for sure who it is yet, but spoiler alert, it's Andy. So, says like this is where he lives, and don't drive there. Take the bus because we're gonna steal his car and leave in that. You know, he goes home and Sheila's there waiting for him, and she like it's like, who are you, like, you're seeing someone else, aren't you? Who is she? Like, and you just, you know, screaming at him like, how could you, and everything, and which she has every right to do because he's being a dick. And then like the dad comes out and tries to like break it up and, you know, ease the tension, like, hey, why don't we just go inside and everything. And she's like, don't worry, like I'll leave you and your family alone, like I'm never gonna talk to you guys again. And she leaves. Pete's mom comes out and says like, Pete, there's a man on the phone asking for you. He keeps calling but he won't say who it is. And so, Pete's obviously nervous. He goes inside and picks up the phone, and it's Mr. Eddy, being like super menacing. And he's like, hey, Pete, how you doing? He's like, I'm good. He's like, good. I'm glad you're doing good. That makes me really happy you're doing good, like that. And he's like, hey, I want you to talk to a friend of mine. Passes the phone over. It's the fucking it's Robert Blake. It's the pale guy. And it's like, and then he says, we've met before, haven't we? And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, don't you remember, at your house? And it's the same conversation pretty much, that, not the full conversation, but it's the same like setup that he had with Fred. And he's like, don't you remember, at your house? But this time we know that Pete was at his house with a strange man. So, which I think it's got to be him. And then so they have this conversation, and I think Pete's kind of putting it together like, okay, my dad said that there's this guy. I bet it's this guy, and he's being super creepy, and he's working with Mr. Eddy, so shit, And then we see him on the bus going to Andy's house. He shows up, and then now we recognize it as Andy's house, and that's where we're like, okay. I mean, we didn't put it together before, but it, now it's confirmed if you didn't put it together. Goes in the back door, which Alice said she was going to leave unlocked. She's going to be upstairs with him. He'll come down, and Pete's supposed to bonk him on the head, and then they take the money and go. So sure enough, he goes in the back door. But when he gets in there in the living room, there's a projector playing, and it's, it's a porn film projected on the wall, but it's Alice, and, I think she straight up said like, oh no, I didn't do anything like that to Pete before. And because he does say that's the first thing, when she's like, oh, I found out about this job, and he's like, yeah, doing porn, right? Because he got offered a videotape before, and it's just like, no, nothing like that. And then there she is getting railed on the projector, and so he's a little okay, he's struggling with this, but then footsteps are coming, and here comes Andy down the stairs, so he hides behind the counter. And then Andy comes in, he looks at the projector or the screen and smiles, and then Pete pops up, hits him over the head. Andy goes down and hits the ground, and then here comes Alice down the stairs. She's just in her underwear. Comes out, she's like, oh, good, you got him. And then is just going about her business and starts getting dressed and everything. Then as she's putting her clothes back on and everything. And, Andy's still, or Pete's still wrestling with everything that's going on. Up pops Andy, dives for Pete, and Pete kind of just grabs him and throws him off to the side. And Andy just goes right into the edge of the glass coffee table and just like, and is just like stuck there. And we just see him from behind at this point, and he's just like, the edge, like the corner of the glass is just like in his forehead, and he's not moving. And I kind of like are just looking at him, like waiting for him to like move or get up or anything like that. And he's not moving, and they confirm like, and he's like, oh my God, like we killed him. And Alice just goes, you killed him. And then just, goes back to grabbing money and shit. And then as she's doing that, Pete's looking around, and there's a picture on the mantle or something. And he like zeroes in on this picture. He goes to look a little closer, and there's Andy, who they just killed, Mr. Eddie, who we know is also Dick Laurent, and both Alice and Renee together. So the two Patricia Arquettes together. And he's like, what? Like, is this you? And then she just comes and points at the blonde and says, that's me. And then, moves on. Pete's nose starts bleeding, and he starts to like have like a headache again. And he's like, hey, like I gotta go to the bathroom. He goes upstairs, and she's just like, oh, it's, such and such door on the left, once you get upstairs. He gets up there, and it's like, it starts like thundering and lightning again. But then it like looks like a motel, like the inside hall of a motel inside the upstairs hallway, because there's numbers on the doors and everything. And then he like opens a door, and it's like all like red light, and it's Alice having sex with somebody. Like, I think it's supposed to be the same, like it's supposed to be like her like doing the film from before. And she's like, it's like, oh, kind of like mocking him. And it's like, did you want to ask me something? Did you want to ask me why? And then he like shuts the door, and then everything's normal again. Goes downstairs, walks up to her. She pulls a gun and points it at him. And, he's like, at this point, he's just like not surprised by anything. And, and same with us. We're like, oh my God, she's just going to like kill him now. And then she hands it to, like, flips it around and hands it to him. Like, put this in your pants, and let's get out of here. They take Annie's car, sweet red 60s Mustang, grab that and hit the road. They're going, she's like, all right, where we're going? And she says, we're going to the desert. And like, I know somebody who we can sell this shit to. And he's out in the cabin in the desert. And so they're driving, and they get to this cabin, which is the cabin that we saw reverse explode before in the vision. They pull up to it. They go up to the door, or go inside, I think, and it's completely empty inside. They're like, oh, he's not home. Well, I guess we'll have to wait. And so go back to the car, and the car's still on, I think, but the headlights are on for sure. They're sitting there, and Pete asks her, like, well, why? Like, why me? Like, why choose me? And she doesn't say, but she starts kissing him, and then they start taking their clothes off, and then they have sex in the dirt in front of the car, which, I mean, it's like very aesthetically pretty cool. But, the practicality, and you think about the mechanics of it, and it's like, oh, I don't want to fucking do that. But, I mean, it looks cool just because it's like just the headlights on them and everything. It's very artistic. But, then like he's like starts saying like, I want you, like, oh, because I think she says like, don't you want me, When he asks like, why choose me? And then so he's like, I want you, you know. And then she stops and just like kind of gets up and, you know, pulls his face up close and like says in his ear like, you'll never have me. And just like gets up, walks into the cabin naked, and that's it. And he is just like laying there kind of like, oh my god, what just happened? He gets up, turns around, it's Bill Pullman now. It's Fred. We're like, what? So, yeah, he gets up, it's Fred. Fred looks into the car, and there's the mystery man, Robert Blake. And then we hear his voice over here, and then he turns, and now he's up on the porch. And so he just like teleported over there. He's like, I'm over here. And so he's there. Fred gets dressed, goes up into the cabin, and it's, even though we saw Alice go in there, it's just Fred and the mystery man. And he's like, all right, like, where's Alice? And he's like, her name is Renee, like real aggressive. If she told you her name was Alice, she was lying, you know. I was like, oh, okay, buddy. Like, geez, sorry. But then, like, you know, he like says that like really aggressively, and then he like picks up a video camcorder and he's like, and what the fuck is your name? And then like Fred's like, shit, I'm out of here. He gets in Andy's Mustang. He takes off into the desert. He's flying down the road, shows up at the Lost Highway Motel. This is the same motel from, you know, the sex motel from before, but we never saw like what the name was. And he's going down the hallway, and it's the same hallway that Pete was envisioning when he got upstairs at Andy's house. You know, we recognize it as the same hallway. Then we see that in one room, it's Dick Laurent or / Mr. Eddie and Renee, because she has her dark hair now, having sex in the bed. And Fred's like kind of listening, and then he goes to his own room. Then we see Fred is looking out the window and watching Renee leave. She gets in the car and drives away. Goes and knocks on Dick Laurent's room. He's like, Renee? Like, is that you? Then opens the door. Fred barges in, pulls a gun on him and shit, and then they're like wrestling a little bit. But then he takes him out to the car, throws him in the trunk, and starts driving away. But as he's putting him in the trunk, we see that the mystery man, even though he left him at the cabin, is in another hotel room watching out the window. So it's like, man, this guy's everywhere. And drives Laurent out into the desert, pops the trunk. Laurent pops out and like tackles him, and then they're wrestling for a little bit. And then Fred, like, or I think Laurent gets like on top of Fred. Fred like kind of reaches his arm out like this, and when he does that, we see an arm, a hand come and put a knife in Fred's hand, slits Laurent's throat, and then he falls off and everything, and get up, and there's the mystery man again, and he's just like watching them. They're both just like watching Laurent bleed out, and Laurent's like, man, like, it's like, what the fuck is this about, or whatever, but doesn't seem too surprised either. And then the mystery guy like pulls out this like pocket TV with an antenna and like hands it to Laurent, and it's then it starts like a flashback of them at like a party where they're like, I guess, premiering the porn at Andy's house, and they're all like watching it and like getting horny together in a group. And then But something that's interesting is in the movie we see, Marilyn Manson makes a cameo. He's like the dude that they're having sex with in the movie, and I don't think it's during this part, but there is a part where it's Marilyn Manson songs, and then there's like uh, Rammstein and like all this like metal and goth and music, because those like kind of like toe a line and they sometimes intersect, but not necessarily. But it's very goth aesthetic film for sure. But then like it changes, and he's also like watching this on the little TV too, and then it changes to his POV looking up at the mystery man and Fred watching him die. And so then he hands the TV back, and then the mystery man just like pulls out a gun and shoots Laurent in the head. And then, so that's the end of him. He then turns and whispers something to Fred that we can't hear. And then it cuts away to the cops, like all the same detectives and everything. They're at Andy's house. There's Andy's body stuck in the coffee table, with his half head. They notice the same picture that Pete had noticed before, but this time when they're looking at it, it's only Andy, Laurent, and Renee. That's it. But she's with the blonde wig, or no, wait. Shit, I don't remember. But either way, it's, now it's only one Patricia Arquette. So it's like confirmed, like this is the same person, that's it. And so I think it is just Renee, not with the dark hair. Because the cops recognize her and say, look at this. Like, know what that is? And they're like, oh shit, that's Fred Madison's wife. Like, yep. And they're like, man, you know what I think? There's no such thing as a bad coincidence, So they're just like, fuck, this is all connected. They're putting it together as we're putting it together. And then and they also say right there that Pete Dayton's fingerprints are all over this place. So like, then that's when he's like, there's no such thing as a bad coincidence. So then we see Fred pull up to his house. He's pulling up to the house. He gets out of the car, out of Andy's car. Wait, is he in Andy's car? I don't remember. But he gets out of the car. He goes up to the intercom, presses it, and says, Dick Laurent is dead. And then as he's going back down to the car, here come the cops, the detectives. They pull up, and they're like, shit, that's him. And, he sees them. They see him. He gets in the car and peels out. They're following him. And then they're just like chasing him, and then we see him like flying down a desert road as it's like, towards the end of the day, and there's like 5 cop cars behind him, and he's just flying down the road. Then it's night, and then it's like basically the same scene from the beginning, the opening credits. And then it's just like flashing on him, and then he starts like convulsing and stuff and like shaking again, but there's flashes of him where it looks like his head's like expanding, and like there's like prosthetics and stuff and everything, and it's like his head's like literally about to explode and just like swelling up, and then it just cuts, and that's it. End credits after that with yeah, just an insane movie, like and very confusing, but like not in a bad way, in my opinion, at least. Like I know there's probably people that would be very frustrated with this movie, but I really like it. I think it's very good at holding your attention in all the right spots, rather than just like throwing you a bunch of shit that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Because you could be confusing and be shitty too. But some interesting tidbits that I found out, like watching special features and stuff. Thing with the intercom and Dick Laurent is dead, that came from David Lynch's like real life. Like he lived in this house that had an intercom, and one day like the intercom buzzes, he goes to answer it, and a voice said, David, Dick Laurent is dead. And he's just like, what? And he like goes to like Like, I don't know a Dick Laurent. Like, who's Dick Laurent? And so he goes to like the window, but like in the movie, the window wasn't right next to the intercom, so he had to like go to the other side of the house. And by the time he got there, the whoever said it was gone. He's like, man, that's like really weird. And he's like, now it's, it's nothing supernatural, I don't think, because he said that there was another David in the neighborhood. So he thinks that maybe the person just went to the wrong house, and it was someone that, the other David and this person knew, and, it was just a misunderstanding. But he just like really, that just stuck with him. And so he wanted to like incorporate that into this movie. And then they were looking all over the place for houses that where they had an intercom, but there was no windows like right in the front that were like convenient. So they found one that was like, that went up for sale in the Hollywood Hills, and kind of near Griffith Park, I guess. And he ended up just buying the house and remodeling it to look like how he wanted. And he's like, this is going to be perfect because we can do whatever we want with this house and make it work like the way we want to for the movie. So, but yeah, that was just crazy to just buy this, probably even in 1997, multi-million-dollar house. But hey, awesome. It turned out good. And yeah, I think every time I watch it, I notice like more things and how more things are connected, especially because I took notes this time. I was able to like really pick up on like how it's like, oh yeah, this conversation that the mystery man has with both Fred and Pete is exactly the same. And it's like they're connected, but they're not the same person, because it's, oh, Fred Madison's wife was murdered by Fred Madison, but Pete Dayton's prints are here. So they're not the same person, but Alice and Renee are. But it's also like, okay, when did everything take place? That's where it gets confusing. And it's like, oh, maybe, Alice wasn't really there. Like maybe she was fake, even though they are the same person, but it was like she was murdered, but then was there to like lure Pete. And I don't know. It's hurts my brain to think about it, but yeah, super good movie. One of my favorites, I would say, like this, Blue Velvet, and Mulholland Drive are like the top three for David Lynch for me personally. I think that's how I ranked it in the episode. Hopefully no one's like keeping track of that. But yeah, great movie. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah. So yeah, that's the episode. Hope you guys enjoyed. If please watch this movie if you haven't. Like honestly, get a little high even, get all introspective and shit. And yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, really enjoy the movie. Enjoy it a little more every time I watch it. And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Rate and review if you're listening. Everything helps, guys. And also follow the Instagram. That's where I post like what movies are coming up and everything like that. So yeah, please follow at Movies They're Pretty Good with no punctuation. And see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye.